Now, going back to molecular dynamics and experiments, basically the fundamental research versus the actual problem solving and how to link the two. One thing I can mention, well, Dr. Englezos talked about carbon management. And Dr. Alavi, you showed us calculations of replacements. I think these things would have very important implications to what we're discussing today. For example, structure 1, small cage, would have a methane better fitted than CO2. So mixed hydrate with a CO2 and methane was the most stable, for example. A lot of research is going on. For example, CO2 is injected in a methane hydrate to make the replacement. That's a new technology that's been developed. And I think this would pose a very important issue. Dr. Alavi, would you like to make a comment?
In one of your conclusions, you claim that the structure 1 hydrate may be more stable when the cages are occupied by both methane and carbon dioxide molecules. I think that that conclusion means that if we supply carbon dioxide to methane hydrate layers, some substantial fraction of methane should be left in the hydrate cages. We cannot recover those methane molecules. So that your conclusion seems to be have some significant importance about the possibility of the technology of the replacement of methane molecules with carbon dioxide molecules.
Yes, just that particular example, I think, can illustrate how important it is to realize the physical chemistry basis for any industrial process. And I think that aspect is something that's often not totally understood. So there's a particular technological goal in mind, and maybe before that goal can be achieved, one has to understand the underlying physical chemistry a little bit more. And I think that's where pure research can come into play. And that's where perhaps molecular simulations can start playing a role. The other thing from my experience at the NRC in terms of fundamental understanding is that one should often use a variety of techniques in synergy. So NMR alone may give us one piece of information. Other spectroscopy may give us another piece of information. However, if we can consolidate all of these and have specialists for the fundamental side all attack the problem together, each one provides some insight, and overall the insight is much greater than each individual piece on its own. And then once this understanding is in place, then I think one has a much clearer picture on how to approach the problem technologically. So this in particular, for example, I believe maybe there's the thermodynamics of CO2 with methane substitution. I don't know how well understood it is, but until it's understood, I think trying to develop a technological process is a little bit maybe premature. It may not, we may not get the efficiency we want, and we don't know whether that's due to a technical reason or whether that's due to a fundamental thermodynamic reason. And if we study those from a fundamental point of view, perhaps we can get a better understanding and then know where to focus efforts in improving the technology. Is it really, if thermodynamics allows it, is it a kinetic problem? We can pinpoint that a little bit better. Or if the problem is not thermodynamic, then how can we improve the kinetics? But if the problem is thermodynamics, then can we substitute another guest in the process? What's the effect of temperature or pressure on the thermodynamics of the process? These are things that are very difficult to do experimentally, but from a simulation point of view, they're not so hard to address. And even though simulations are always uncertain, the insight we gain is still quite useful. And so I would say, given the expense of trying something from a technological point of view, if it's quite good if if the goal of the project is known, to make that known to researchers who are doing more fundamental work, and perhaps the insight they can provide can then guide some of the technological advance.
Yes, I'd just like to make a comment on this issue, because I think back in 2003 we published a paper on precisely this topic. And basically we looked at the phase diagram of the mixed hydrate, and indeed methane prefers the small cage, but that doesn't mean you cannot remove it. If you keep on feeding the hydrate CO2, eventually all the methane will come out, but it's incredibly inefficient. And with that experiment, we found that neither the kinetic nor the thermodynamic limit had been reached in our experiment. And I think we recovered about 60% of the methane. But it is very much dependent on the details of how you do it. For instance, if you expose a methane hydrate to CO2, you'll get a certain amount of replacement. But you get a different answer that if you keep replacing the mixed gas over the hydrate with CO2, then over a long time, all the methane will indeed come out. Thermodynamics will tell you that this has to happen. So the details are really important. And I think until you really have a close look at all of the details, you will not really understand what's going on. You can certainly do an experiment and come to a conclusion, but it may not be a universal conclusion. It depends on your specific conditions.
Thank you for your comment. The matter that we have been discussing, Professor Omura or Dr. Englezos, any comments
about the the technology of proposed technology of the substitute of replacement of methane molecules in the hydrate layer with carbon dioxide?
My comment would be that this is a perfect example that where there is a need for understanding more the underlying physical chemistry, but at the same time, that understanding will help you devise better technical approaches to operate at a larger scale. But there are also intrinsic difficulties related to the technical side of things that have to be dealt. It's a perfect, I think, example, but at the same time, it holds, I think, considerable promise as a technology because of the potential reward that you have dealing with this. I just want to add a secondary comment, and I was inspired by what Dr. Uchida said when he mentioned about the need for better understanding. Quite frequently, I think, you notice this in the hydrate science and technology literature now, that as we saw this morning, there is a tremendous proliferation of information on gas hydrates. So question, how do you navigate effectively within this information, so much information? Given the fact that this information comes from different backgrounds, this is a multidisciplinary topic and spans a number of scales, as we saw from Dr. Ripmeester's slide. So I think we use different language, and understanding is not necessarily complete. And I think sometimes I get the sense we live in parallel universes, and we saw that at the ICGH conference, where there was complete segregation between the large-scale hydrate science and the molecular scale science.
はい、ありがとうございました。会場の方からはいかがですか。
Any comments or questions from the floor? Not necessarily on the methane hydrate CO2 replacement topic. If I may, I'd like to ask Narita-san to say something. MH21 project leader. He was a MH21 project leader. Before saying anything, I'd like to say the following. From 1992, we have been working on the research of gas hydrate usage. From 1994, the project became full-fledged. During the initial phase, Dr. Ripmeester and Dr. Englezos were big teachers for us. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank both of these gentlemen. From year 2000 to systematically develop the usage-based research slowed down, and 90% of the time is spent on resource development at the moment. Now, about the CO2 replacement, I don't believe that technology or method. What we are doing is, after producing methane hydrate, highly penetrative to the highly penetrative reserve, we inject CO2 gas, and heat is generated from that activities. And we use that heat source to decompose methane hydrate to increase the recovery rate. When methane hydrate is depleted in a reserve, strength is decline. So in order to recover the strength of the geographical layer of depleted methane hydrate reserve, we use some replacement, but it's not direct replacement. There's a methane hydrate in between, and therefore penetration is not so good. Therefore, some kind of media containing CO2 is quite difficult because it breaks the reserve. So we are not considering the proposed method as a main methodology. Thank you for your response. It's a very practical or realistic problem. Any other questions or comments? Maybe this is the last opportunity for me to comment, so I'd like to talk about the technology for use, or Professor OHMURA and Dr. Ripmeester were saying about talking about structure and property. OHMURA-san, since the days of working at AIAST, a practically usable hydrate. In other words, at matters that enable the generation of hydrate at high temperature to use it as a cool energy source to realize heat pump cycle. Specifications were what we were looking for, including ourselves. We could make some guess, but we had to go through trial and error processes. From that point of view, as was explained in Thurman Abdi's presentation, if you use a molecular approach to control the structure, technology to control the structure can generate hydrate that meets the specification of various demand for industrialization.
So I'm not the expert, so you may be thinking that I'm saying that too easily, but those are some of my expectations on your research. So, Professor Arabi, do you want to make some counter comments on what he had said?
So, about the possibility of predicting the, say, the hydrates appropriate for some desired properties.
That's one of the strong points of simulation, that you can artificially take one molecule, artificially remove the charge, add charge, and see, increase the size, decrease the size, and see what factor it is that controls the property that you're looking at. So by this type of study, then you can direct the type of guess that you're going to use in the hydrate. In the example I showed, for example, we had some gases where the electrostatic interactions were stronger, some gases where the size of the guess was more important in the substitution. If we understand what drives the particular process, we can then maybe narrow down the gases that we're studying for, or the guess that we're studying for a particular use. So in that respect, I think the simulation can, if one does simulation first and then do the experiments the simulation can give you some additional information with maybe 60, 70, 80% certainty. And I think that would be then a good guide for experimental efforts, that likely what's driving the process is this particular property, and rather than trying 10 different guesses, one can narrow down the search to a smaller number based on the predictions of the simulation. So in that respect, I think the simulations could play a role in narrowing down the field of things that one would try.
Thank you very much. Does it answer your question? So we still have 20 minutes to go. So we would like to ask anybody from the panel or from the floor to make some comments on the future of the hydrate research, or...
Well, I would like to respond to an earlier comment where it was stated that it was the time scale and length scale of the work we were doing were not appropriate to problem solving, where sizes are more like centimeters and periods are days, etc. But I would like to point out that I don't think one needs to do molecular scale calculations. On one of my slides, I said that the macroscopic modeling had to be consistent with molecular scale, only consistent. And there are many examples in which macroscopic models that are in common use are not consistent with the molecular scale. And I would say that means that these methods are not scientifically accurate. Maybe the approximations don't matter, but maybe they do. And one example, for instance, is the application of intrinsic kinetics to decomposition of hydrate. Well, one of the assumptions is that the system is isothermal, which is impossible from the point of view of molecular scale decomposition of hydrate. And the other insight one might gain is how to deal with heat transfer and mass transfer coefficient from decomposing hydrate. Well, you can do this experiment by MD and find out what happens to your heat and thermal gradients, and you can also see where bubble formation occurs. And you can take that forward to the larger scale. But at least then you have some information which points out the problems with the current model. And then you can take steps to correct these. You don't have to apply molecular scale concepts to the large scale. You just have to ensure that the two are consistent. So that's basically my comment here.
Thank you very much. So for the formation and the composition, the model in the level of the micro or micro whether it is consistent with the reality is the issue. For the composition, there would be the heat generation. So it's not on the isothermal, but there has been the model that has not been considered on that so far. So for that particular comment or for any other points, would you like to make any suggestion or feedback or opinion or question? And I actually have told in the beginning of this panel discussion that I would ask each one of the panelists to review and recap on your presentation, but I'm sorry about my poor facilitation. I think I haven't asked each one of you to recap on your own presentation. So Professor Omura or Professor Englezos or Professor Arabi, if you would like to emphasize on any other things, please do so now. Microphone. Well, thank you very much for wonderful presentations today. I am very much interested in the commercialization or industrialization. So there can be lots of application, for example, the heat pumps and also the, well, Professor Omura had said, and also as Mr. Watanabe said, that industrially how it can be regasified or for transport. So for the actual usage of the hydrate, when would it be? Can you give us any timeline? Is that going to be 5 years from now or 10 years or 20 years from now? When you are making that kind of the forecasting, how long will it take and what specific hydrate technology would be available? I do understand your question and intention, but I myself, I don't want to actually answer this because I may make mistake on the estimate. Anybody else? Well, I was expecting to have this question, but it's a bit difficult to answer. And in my presentation, I mentioned that we have this pilot plant. The 5 tons per day, there will be the 20 times small scale of the project will be starting next year. And we'll have some trials first, and so it would take about 5 years. So I think it will be 2016 perhaps. And I'm not really sure how it's going to be starting, but for the time, if we can show some efficiency, then maybe in 2016, it may not be a perfect style, but we would like to have a pilot project or pilot plant. And that's our company's perspective. Any other person who would like to make this guess? For Professor Englezos, for the carbon management in the future, can you give us any time scale or timeline?
I will not risk definite prediction, but I can say that for carbon dioxide capture, the most likely candidates are technologies that are actually practiced at the industrial scale already, and that is absorption and adsorption. But still, the path is not straightforward. I've seen a roadmap from the Department of Energy in the United States where they are moving progressively from 5 to 25 megawatt scale demonstration technologies, and they hope by 2020 to be able to implement carbon dioxide capture, not necessarily with hydrates, but with some technology. You'll probably see hydrates playing a role in sequestration projects because those formations in the earth have water and you want to store CO2 under high pressure, so it's likely that hydrate will play a role there. beneficial or not, I don't know. I'm anxious to see the deployment of technologies based on hydrates, whether it is in refrigeration or natural gas transport. But I'm more and more convinced that the location of this demonstration will be in Japan. I do not know when, but most likely in Japan, because I'm really impressed with the progress that has been made. And more importantly, I'm impressed with the strong engagement of the industry, knowing the strong manufacturing capacity that exists in this country. And so I'm really impressed.
はい、どうもありがとうございました。なかなかそう答えにくい。
Thank you very much. This was a very difficult question to answer, I'm sure. Dr. Watanabe has given an answer. And since from Mitsui Engineering and Shipbuilding, we have the head of engineering and development, Mr. Kanda. Would you like to take the question, including your future view as well?
Thank you
very much. I'm Kanda from the Development Center of Mitsui Shipbuilding. As Dr. Watanabe mentioned earlier, we are considering using hydrate as a means of transportation, but CO2 capture, thermal storage, heat pump, I'm sure that there are many possible applications. In terms of time span or time scale, energy usage or CCS will have to be looked at from a long-term perspective, but thermal storage and heat pump are the technologies that may become reality in short to medium term. Dr. Mori talked about fundamental research in the morning regarding hydrate and how close it has come to what we're trying to do. Hydrate is often used as solids. Thermal storage and heat pump would be basically founded directly on fundamental research and molecular research. So it can be developed in short term. It's easier for industry and academia to collaborate. But when it comes to separation or transportation, it has to be handled as solids, and dissociation, reaction, formation, everything will have to be considered and also handled kinetically, which is a challenge. So depending on what we're trying to do, depending on the theme, some things will happen more quickly than others. And also, another point is the commercial product directly supported by molecular research, or does it need additional development before it can be commercialized? Molecule level, crystal level, particle level, powder. These solid properties will have to be better understood in order for hydrate to be used more widely, and that's the trickiest part for us who are directly involved. Molecular level research sometimes is very close to what we're trying to do as commercial development, but property of the particle or solid, such as chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, we need property data, and this is something that's still lacking in most parts, so we would like to work more closely together with the academia for this purpose. I see. In terms of technical development, hydrate is solid, and handling hydrate as compared to liquids and gases is difficult. It has its own unique challenges. I think you have first-hand experience, that's why you're saying this. So your belief is that heat pump can be more easily developed based on basic research. Dr. Omura, would you like to talk about this time frame or time constraint? I don't think I'm in a position to answer directly, but as Dr. Kanda mentioned just now, thermal storage, if we get serious about it, can be implemented relatively quickly. Heat pump is smaller in terms of scale, not as big as a plant. So it's not a major scale plant that would have to separate a huge amount of CO2. So in that sense, I agree with him. But we still have to cycle the solids, although the system itself is small. So for heat pump, I think the challenge is how to deal with the slurry. Thermal storage maybe relatively quickly, but the heat pump will take a bit longer than thermal storage. That's what I think. Thank you. In the case of heat pump, liquid and gas are compressed at the same time. So therefore, it's closer to isothermal compression, and that is why the workload is smaller. Gas and liquid has to be compressed at the same time by the same compressor. But compressors that are used cannot be that large, whether it's for residential or building use, commercial use. So we need additional technical development to develop a new compressor that is powerful but compact. And this is something that cannot be done by universities. We need commercial organizations, industry participants who want to take up this challenge. So this is something that we would like to ask the industry to do. Often we get requests from the industry about what the universities should do, but hopefully there are organizations, commercial organizations in Japan that are brave enough to take up the challenge. Well, this is just my personal point of view, so if it's too difficult a request or if you disagree, please do not hesitate to share your opinion with us. Well, we have very little time left. At this point, I would like to ask the panelists whether there is anything that you would like to say at this point, some burning comments. I think we have talked a lot about basic research versus what's happening in the industry. And Mr. Watanabe also said that he has high hopes, high expectations on MD. Experiments and logical research and the commercial, we have to basically find a link between these different areas. And I would say that hydrate is an area where this is relatively easy, because we have Dr. Arabi, molecular dynamics professor, and Dr. Mizuki, and others who are really strong with logics. And then we have the mechanical engineering people like us, and also people like Dr. Ripmeester. So experiments and logics can be combined to accelerate development. And this is something that I would expect for hydrate research in the future. Thank you. We are really beginning to run out of time, but do we have any more comments from the audience or from the panel? I see a lot of young people in the audience today. So let's see if any of them has a question. If I put somebody on the spot, I think I will get resented, so I will not do that. Yes, Dr. Uchida? Since this is the last opportunity, I would like to say, basically in the same line as Dr. Narita, I would like to thank you. Hydrate research is really exciting now in Japan. And looking back, there was a very small group of people who started working on hydrate in Japan. And NRC, UBC, they were really leading edge in Canada. And the small group in Japan collaborated with Canada and decided to basically take this on. And that is why it is so exciting today in Japan. So I would like to thank all the forerunners of hydrate research. And I think it was a great milestone that you could do this international collaboration. And international collaboration, I believe, is going to play an important role for the future of hydrate research. I just wanted to say that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Basic research and its collaboration with engineering efforts. I focused on that topic. And I forgot to ask you about collaboration between Japan and Canada, so I'd like to thank the gentleman for referring to that. In the interest of time, we need to conclude this panel discussion. I'd like to thank the panelists, and I would like to also thank the audience for very valuable inputs. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for this panel discussion, despite the typhoon. With this, all the programs for today have been completed. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank, as an organizer, this forum had been organized and sponsored by Keio University and Canadian Embassy. I believe that a fruitful discussion had been held, and I'd like to thank all of you for fruitful discussion. About the hydrate, we got the comments towards the end. It is a global issue and challenge, so including international collaboration, Keio would like to be active in the research on hydrate and contribute to this endeavor. And I would like to have closer relationship with industries from Canada as well. With my short remarks, I'd like to conclude today's forum. Thank you, everyone.